I think something is living in the apartment next to mine. The landlord says it's impossible. I need to tell someone about what happened in my apartment building. I've been holding this in for 3 weeks now, and I can't sleep anymore. The police think I'm crazy. My therapist wants to up my medication, and my landlord threatened to evict me if I spread any more rumors. But I know what I experienced was real. I know what I saw. And if you live in an old apartment building where the walls are thin and the tenants keep to themselves, maybe you should pay attention to this. It started in late October. I'd been living in this pre-war building in the city for about 8 months. The kind of place with radiators that clank at night, hallways that smell like a mixture of old wood and someone's dinner, and neighbors you hear but never really meet. My apartment was on the fourth floor, Unit 4C. To my left was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who I'd see occasionally shuffling to the elevator with her shopping cart. To my right, Unit 4B had been empty since I moved in. The building manager, Ron, told me the previous tenant had died. Natural causes, he said. An old man who'd lived there for 30 years. They'd cleaned the place out, repainted, and were looking for new renters, but the apartment had sat vacant. I didn't think much of it. The rent in the city is insane, but people are picky. Maybe it had a weird layout or got no sunlight. Then, on October 23rd, I heard the moving sounds. I was working from home on a video call with my team when I heard the unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across the floor. Heavy, scraping sounds that made my teeth hurt. I muted myself and listened. Footsteps. Multiple people, it seemed. Voices, though I couldn't make out words. I felt a small relief. Finally, a new neighbor. Maybe someone normal. Maybe even someone around my age I could actually talk to. That evening, I decided to be friendly. I'm not usually the type to introduce myself to strangers, but 8 months of isolation during my remote work situation had made me lonely. I picked up a bottle of wine from the bodega downstairs, practiced a casual greeting in my head, and knocked on the door of 4B. No answer. I could hear a television inside. The blue flicker of light came from under the door. I knocked again, louder this time. Hello, I'm your neighbor from 4C. Just wanted to welcome you to the building. Nothing. I stood there feeling foolish, staring at the scratched brass numbers on the door. 4B. The 4 was slightly crooked, like it had been removed and replaced incorrectly. I pressed my ear closer to the door, and that's when I heard it. Not the TV, not footsteps. Breathing. Someone was standing right on the other side of the door, breathing. Not heavily, not trying to be creepy, just standing there. Breathing steadily, like they were waiting for me to leave. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back. Okay, well, welcome to the building, I said to the door, and hurried back to my apartment. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe they were shy. Maybe they were on a phone call. Maybe they just didn't want to be bothered. But the image of someone standing silently on the other side of that door, listening to me, wouldn't leave my mind. The next few days were when things got weird. I started hearing the new tenant at odd hours, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., footsteps pacing back and forth. Not frantically, but methodically. From one end of the apartment to the other, over and over. I'm a light sleeper, and the walls in this building are paper thin. You can hear everything. Mrs. Chen's TV game shows, the couple upstairs arguing, and now these endless footsteps. I tried to ignore it. I bought earplugs. They barely helped. Then came the knocking. It started on the fourth night. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my wall. The wall I shared with 4B. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe they'd bumped into the wall. I waited. 30 seconds later, knock, knock, knock. Same spot. Same rhythm. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to race. I stared at the wall like I could see through it. Why would someone knock on the wall at midnight? I grabbed my phone and almost called the building manager, but what would I say? My neighbor knocked on the wall? I'd sound insane. I decided to knock back, just once. A firm knock, a "hey, I'm trying to sleep" kind of knock. The response was immediate. Knock, 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 knock. Rapid fire knocking at least a dozen times, all in the same spot. Then silence. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, exhausted and angry, I went to Ron's office in the lobby. He was eating a bagel and watching something on his phone. "Ron, who moved into 4B?" He looked up, cream cheese on his lip. "Hmm? 4B? Yeah, someone moved in a few days ago." He frowned and set down his bagel. He pulled up something on his computer, scrolling through what I assumed was a tenant list. "Nobody's moved into 4B. It's still vacant." My stomach dropped. That's impossible. I heard people moving furniture in. I hear someone in there every night. Ron's frown deepened. He stood up and grabbed his keys. "Let me check." We went up together in the creaking elevator. The fourth-floor hallway was empty and quiet. We walked to 4B, and Ron unlocked the door. The apartment was completely empty. I set up my phone on my nightstand with a voice recording app and went to bed. If I was losing my mind, at least I'd have proof. If something was actually happening, I'd have evidence. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, pacing, back and forth. I grabbed my phone and checked the recording. It was still running. I lay there listening, my heart pounding. The footsteps were clear, deliberate, heel toe, like someone walking in dress shoes. Then, the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, clutching my phone. I whispered into it, documenting what I was hearing. The knocking continued, then stopped. The footsteps moved closer to the wall, closer to my bed. And then I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. I checked into a hotel that night. The next day, I went to the police. I played them the recording. They listened, exchanged glances, and told me it sounded like building noise, and that I should talk to my landlord. They took a report, but said there was nothing they could do unless there was an actual threat. I went back to the building that afternoon, and Ron was waiting for me. "We need to talk," he said, and led me to his office. He closed the door. "Mrs. Chen says you've been acting strange, running around at night. She's concerned." "Ron, there's someone in 4B. There's nobody in 4B. "Then how do you explain the recording?" He sighed. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. The guy who lived there before, the old tenant, he didn't die of natural causes. He did it himself. Hanged himself in the bedroom, right on the other side of your wall." I felt dizzy. Nobody wants to rent it because of that. We cleaned it, but people in the building talk. Now you're hearing things, and I get it. It's creepy. But you're going to upset the other tenants. If you can't handle it, maybe you should consider moving. I left his office in a daze. I didn't go back to my apartment that night, or the next night. I stayed with a friend trying to process everything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Finally, 3 days later, I forced myself to go back. It was my home. I couldn't let fear control me. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing. I felt foolish. Maybe Ron was right. Maybe I'd let the story get in my head. That night, I slept with the lights on. At 3:33 a.m., I woke up. Not to knocking, not to footsteps, to the sound of my bedroom door opening. I was facing the wall, my back to the door, frozen in terror. I heard slow, shuffling footsteps enter my room. The floor creaked under weight that shouldn't be there. The footsteps moved around my bed slowly until they stopped right in front of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could feel someone standing there, inches from my face, staring down at me. And then I felt it, a cold hand touching my forehead, gently, almost tenderly. I screamed and lunged forward, turning on my bedside lamp. Nothing. My room was empty. The door was closed. I ran to it and checked the lock. Still locked from the inside. I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with every light on until sunrise. I moved out 2 days later. I broke my lease, lost my deposit, and found a new place across town. I never went back to that building. But here's the thing that haunts me, the thing I can't explain. When I was packing my stuff, I found something in my bedroom. On the wall I shared with 4B, right where I used to sleep, there was a mark, a handprint. Small, pale, pressed into the paint, like someone had pushed against it from the other side. But Ron said the apartment was empty. He showed me. There was nothing there. So, whose hand left that print? And why, even now in my new apartment? Do I sometimes wake up at 3:33 a.m. to the feeling of someone standing over my bed, breathing softly in the dark? I don't know what was in 4B. I don't know if it was the old tenant, something he left behind, or something worse. But I do know this. Some walls are thin for a reason. Some neighbors are better left unmet. And if you ever move into an apartment with a dark history, and you hear knocking on your wall in the middle of the night, don't knock back.